And young people, it's about bearing in mind that they're not fully cooked yet. They're still developing. They're not going to know all the answers, and they're not necessarily going to be able to express their emotions very well or know what they are actually feeling. Mm-hmm. It's about being okay with that. I suppose a moment ago, sometimes the work with an adolescent is giving them the kind of confidence to fail or to make wrong decisions. Taking away the fear of that. The other part of it is the expectations. Sometimes I've noticed people have this belief, if they allow themselves to feel sadness, that it's going to lead to depression.
Yeah.
So they're very much, well, I'm coming to see you because I feel sad sometimes, but I can't have that. I don't want to be depressed.
Welcome to another episode with James Lyster.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, when you work in your practice in neuros, who comes through the door? Who do you see?
Okay, actually it's quite diverse type of people, but I work with adolescents and adults primarily. I have a mixture of those two, really. And for the sorts of people that come through the door, it's hard to kind of quantify. Off the top of my head, I would say I do a lot of work with men and also gay men. That's quite a large proportion of my work. But I work with men, women, gay, straight, young and old, I suppose. Yeah.
How do you find the difference, right? Let's say firstly focusing on working with adults and adolescents. Is that like, do you kind of have to shift in your head the mindset being like, okay, I need to kind of go and speak this way? And I don't work with adolescents. I only work with adults.
Okay.
So I don't have that point of view at all, or the experience.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's an element of that because I suppose you do have to be mindful of the words you're using. I tend to speak a lot and I use words that might be, I don't know, you have to adjust your language. Yeah. So I can't say the word existential and assume anyone knows what it means really. We'd have to be mindful of that with adults and adolescents. Fundamentally, you don't have to be too different with adolescents. They can smell BS from a mile away, or incongruence, I suppose. They're really good at spotting it. And you just have to be real. You just have to be who you are. And I find that works best with adolescents. But when you're working with an adolescent, you're never really working with just them anyway. You are working with their family. They might not be in the room the whole time, but
could they be?
They potentially, yeah. So to lay out how I work with adolescents is first I have to speak with the parents or parental guardians about, because adolescents don't tend to pick up the phone and call you. It's always a parent generally. And I spend probably about an hour with them without the adolescent present, asking them why they think their young person needs therapy.
Can I also ask, we keep saying the word adolescent, right? Is there an age limit on this? Like what's...
Yeah, okay. So I work with young people over the age of 12. Okay, so that's where technically adolescent therapy begins. Before then, it would be a version of play therapy available.
Right.
There's kind of like a weird point in children's development where there's a bit of a gap in the therapeutic market. I think children from about age 10 to 12, they might not really be suitable for play therapy, but not quite ready for
talking therapy.
Yeah. And also working with adolescents is not always talk. A lot of the time it's about using other media to express. So there'd be creative parts to that. So using creative arts to express.
Like what, for example?
So paint, paper, pens, drawing, illustrating a concept or a feeling. There's be quite a bit of that. Or perhaps using objects and sand trays. So having a sand tray where young people can arrange objects in a meaningful way that can be then explored. So it's not always just chatting. So there's different types. Sometimes we use movement or music.
Like the movement would be like in what way?
Well, it's just allowing a young person to move.
Like somatic kind of.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be using a somatic technique. It would be sometimes young people get told they don't have a lot of autonomy.
Right.
They have to sit still for 8 hours a day in a classroom and
be silent.
Not talk, or there's lots of rules. And the therapy, to be useful, sometimes it's good to remove a lot of those blocks. So it's being mindful of how the young person is. Do they seem to have an energy? Are they kind of twitching? And do you want to move? Should we have this conversation standing up? It's quite simple, really, isn't it? But sometimes we have, again, if you have too rigid an idea of what therapy should be, you might be glued to your chair and expect your client to be glued to theirs. And really, I try and take this approach with adults as well, but especially with young people. It's about noticing, it looks like you need to move. Shall we move? Yeah. So that might be just walking in circles around the office. Could be leaning against the wall. Sometimes it's just listening to a song. So it's about being quite flexible as well. So you do adapt. The adaptations you make are going to suit the young person and what they need. And young people, it's about bearing in mind that they're not fully cooked yet. They're still developing. They're not going to know all the answers, and they're not necessarily going to be able to express their emotions very well or know what they are actually feeling. It's about being okay with that. I suppose the challenge as a therapist is managing the expectations of the parent or whoever's presenting the young person versus championing the young person. So there's a dynamic at play that isn't there when you're just working with an adult. So when I'm working with an adult, there's a contract. We have our boundaries. This is how much the session is. This is what you can expect from me. And it's quite straightforward. But with young people, it's muddy. A parent might want a particular behaviour to be gotten rid of, but who's to say that that's a bad behaviour? You know, it could be like, or it could be a parent has an expectation that their young person should study more.
Right.
And
so you're almost being hired by the parent or the guardian, maybe from their point of view as if for a specific job, specific task, we enhance this or kind of reduce this. But then when you actually meet the young person, it might be a quite different story.
Well, I mean, this is why the initial assessment with the adult is so important. Before I even see the young person, really drilling down with the parent presenting, what is this about? Is this a you problem or is it a them problem? And quite a lot of the time, it's a you problem. It's a parent problem.
How do you handle it then?
It's by being brutally honest, like us. Then you don't have to sugarcoat things. You say, well, I think that's more of a concern for you than the young person. You want them to, you're not happy with them because they're not studying to the frequency you believe they should be.
Right.
But who are you to say? Well, then they won't get into college. Well, who are you to say that they should go to college? You know? You're getting disappointed and anxious because you have expectations of your young person which might not be fair to have.
That's kind of, you know, when we were doing our course, you know, I would be kind of really looking at like, do I want to work with adolescents? Because like, you know, still even working with adults, you hear the stories, what they were told in childhood. You hear what they went through in childhood. And I just sometimes struggling to imagine having that young person in that age, in that developmental stage with that issues being brought to me, fix them, even though I don't think that's all the time the case.
No, it's not all the time, but there's a big part of that. And it is delicate, but you kind of have to be kind of upfront and honest as well. Because if you walk on eggshells around an issue, you're not really communicating the problem. But yeah, you've got to bear in mind, whatever's bringing the parent forward to say my child needs help, there's an anxiety in the parent already.
Right.
Because parents want to protect their children from harm. It's a real strong drive. And if you feel like your child is struggling or being harmed in some way, the urge to fix that is huge. Yeah. But sometimes things can't be fixed. Life is hard. And we can't rob young people of the experiences they need. So, you know, if you see a child, if you're raising a child and they're struggling to tie their shoelaces, and they get so frustrated and upset when they can't do it. The temptation is to step in and do it for them. You're saving them pain.
To rescue them.
Yeah, but they're not learning.
Yeah.
And then they grow up to be adults who can't tie shoelaces.
Yeah.
And then they say, my bloody parents wouldn't help me to do this.
Wouldn't support me instead of doing it for
instead
me.
of rescuing or fixing.
Yeah.
So it's a normal, natural part of the human experience to have uncomfortable emotions, sadness, be upset, feel anxious at times. These are all things that sometimes when a parent sees in their child, they automatically can't tolerate. So sometimes it's about, when you're working with adolescents, you're sometimes working concurrently with an adult, but in a kind of a particular way, about helping them to manage their own anxieties about things. Like, it's okay if your child is crying.
Like navigating parenthood, maybe in a different stage of their children's development.
Well, that's right. I mean, and also acknowledging that sometimes we expect more than our teenagers are capable of at the time. All young people want to be treated as adults, but they're not always capable of actually being treated as adults. And some parents think their children should be emotionally and developmentally at a stage for which they're not yet.
Right.
Yeah. Especially if they've got more than one child.
Okay.
Didn't have this problem with your sister. She was fine. And what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And look at your brother. He studied, 5 hours a night and came out with a first. And what are you doing? And so the parent has to, there's a part of the work that's for the parent and there's part of the work that's for the young person. But sometimes in the very first kind of meeting, we might discover that actually it's work the parent needs to do.
Would you work, both of them maybe together?
No, what I would sometimes suggest when that situation comes up, I would suggest that the parent find a different therapist, because if it turns out that the young person does still need to come, I'm not written off because there's so few adolescent therapists in this part of the country that if I was to burn myself ethically by having worked with the parent solely, then I couldn't work with the child.
Right.
So I would preserve that if I could. And so, it's kind of hard to tell someone that you think that the issue with their child is actually them. Yeah. But sometimes that needs to be explored. Or sometimes we can agree, well, I will start working with the young person, but you are going to need to do your own work on this too.
Yeah.
And here's someone you could go see or find someone. So, yeah, working with adolescents is challenging because it's managing the expectations of the people who are paying you as well. Well, I'm paying you to fix my child and they're still not doing what I want them to do. But that's not all parents, by the way. Some young people are brought clearly are in distress and need help. And that's what I provide.
What's the kind of common, or are there any common difficulties young adolescents are dealing with that you see them for?
I'm not good enough. It's common in adults too.
Yeah.
But it can be very profound in young people. And also it's about figuring out who they are and being okay with that.
So identity in a way.
Yeah. Identity. It's a big part of it because school is kind of tribal. So school is, I think, probably one of the worst inventions in a way, the way it is. It groups a whole bunch of very diverse individuals and treats them all the same. And then they break into little factions and tribes. And that's, people abandon parts of themselves to belong to these tribes. And when I say tribes, I mean like the group that's into sport or the group that's into that music. So a lot of adolescents are not being truly themselves. Yeah. But that becomes very stressful and draining, and it makes people very anxious to turn up, be part of a tribe, but know it's not truly who they are, and to fear that they'll be rejected if they were honest. And then
if they stop masking.
Yeah, it's masking.
If they stop pretending in order to belong.
Yeah, if I have an opinion that differs to this group, will I be outcast? Will I be rejected, shamed? Will I be bullied? Or maybe I am being bullied? Yeah.
So if I'm me, will I be punished for me being me?
Absolutely, fundamentally, yeah. that's a huge part of the work.
And that can also transcend through decades further into adulthood. I think
frequently does.
Yeah.
You probably will encounter this in your adult work.
Yeah.
But it starts way before then. Yeah.
It's almost like a survival, like the kind of tribal. You use the word tribal. I really like that. Being like, if I'm going to be outcast from my tribe, I won't have the manpower to hunt.
Yep.
So it is a survival thing. I think for kind of part of our brain, amygdala, it would be kind of like ostracizing means death in a way.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. If I don't belong to the tribe, I won't survive.
Yeah, and the anxiety and the kind of palpitations, panic attacks.
Yes.
I can imagine.
Yes, so there's a lot of anxiety in our young people. Part of it's to do with this belonging, but they're not really belonging anywhere because what they're doing is denying parts of themselves to fit in. And that's something you can't necessarily take away from them. It's actually part of the development experience. It's something we shouldn't necessarily be robbing young people of, because perhaps they do have to try on different outfits before they realise the one I have is the best.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like robbing someone of tying their shoelaces, like I said a moment ago. Sometimes the work with an adolescent is giving them the kind of confidence to fail or to make wrong decisions. Taking away the fear of that, I suppose, because the other part of it is the expectations they have. So the expectations of their parents, whether they're well-intentioned or not, the expectations of teachers, them being told this stage of their life is so important, when the reality is probably not as important as we make them believe.
I find that very interesting because I think kind of in many cases I would be working with with adult client on something that is 20, 30 years old story that they believe at that time, and they may have maybe even forgotten the story, but the principle stays, and the principle is somewhere there, and it kind of almost says, if I don't do what other people are telling me is best for me, I'm going to fail, or I'm going to again be ostracized.
Yes.
Right, and that's a huge block, almost like this anger that it's holding somebody down. Yeah. Without them even kind of acknowledging, okay, what are actually my options? Can I actually see what if I do fail? What's going to happen after it?
That's that thing, isn't it? It's trying to control and trying to find certainty when we can never have that. It's about being okay with the uncertainty, but it kind of infects everybody's life, myself included, and you, and all these young people. So I think about some of the things I was told as a teenager, all well-intentioned, not to cause harm, but potentially does. Yeah, in the sense that, I'm not good enough because I'm not doing what my parents say I should. And really, they're just saying that I should to make sure that I'm okay and I survive. Or part of it to make sure that they can reassure themselves that they're good parents because I turned out well. And there's that element of it as well.
And almost like the kind of like the language transcends from the parent to the child, being like, well, I mean the best for you. I'm a well-intentioned parent, but only way how I can get it over to you is that you have to do what I think is best for you. Because otherwise, I'll be anxious that you're going to fail in love, in life. Yeah, or maybe also in love. Yeah, right. So they kind of almost like transfer this responsibility, but from the parent mindset to a child. They can't grasp the concept, doesn't have the years of experience, doesn't have the kind of life experience, getting jobs, getting whatever it is, how is mortgage, relationships, kids, grandkids, and cannot hold that within them, other than I've been told something bad will happen to me if I'm not following my parents, guardians' advice, which they do mean well to me, but I just can't decode this hidden message.
No, they just think there's something with them. Yeah. But that's what some parents do, or quite a lot of parents I think do, is they regulate their own anxieties through their children. Yeah. And it's not because they have malice, it's just that they themselves are unaware. Yeah. Yeah. And they've got expectations of themselves as a parent, or measurements. I'm a good parent if my child goes to university. Yeah. Yeah.
If they have a degree. If they have a job in a good company.
Exactly.
Which I might pick for them.
That's right.
Because that's what I did when I was in that age.
Or the anxiety of, if you're going to pursue arts, I don't know that. I don't know any artists. I don't know people that make money. Like, that's the most important thing.
Who pays their mortgage from art?
Exactly. And how can I be okay with you doing something that I'm uncertain about? Yeah. So it kind of infects downwards.
God forbid, I had a dream of being an artist, the parent might have said themselves, but I have let that go and see how well I've done because I have let that dream go.
Right.
You know, I've got that director position somewhere there, and what I'm not happy.
Yes.
You have food to eat. You know, we have a car to drive and all these things.
Yeah. But you will know that all of these things don't. If there's something wrong in your life, none of that matters. You're going to be in pain. Could be in pain and comfort, I suppose.
And could be also in pain with the child.
Yeah.
Because there probably long term probably is not going to be a viable solution anyway, to be pushing them into what you wanted them to do all the time. It's going to give up one way or the other. They will stop doing that. And if you just keep asking them to do what you know you're supposed to believe it's the best, you're going to be disappointed.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Because that's the parent, like a parent of an adolescent, if they feel that their child is going in a direction that gives them anxiety, the simplest way to cure that anxiety is to stop or try and redirect the child. And sometimes they use therapy to do that. And that's why it's really important as an adolescent therapist that you are mindful of what the agendas are or discovering what the source of the anxiety in the family is, you know, and attending to that. But once you start seeing that young person, they are your client and their best interests become your best interests. So it's hard work, and I limit the amount of young people I work with at any one time. So I've got like a certain slot in the day, 4 days a week, and that's my adolescent slot, because there's more work with it. The sessions are slightly shorter; they're about 45 to 50 minutes long, but the admin is longer. Because you have to liaise with parents, you have to regularly check in with them as well, let them know that what's going on in a way that protects the young person, manage the confidentiality things. So there's a bit more to it, but it's rewarding work.
Do you see you as a father? Do you see any benefits to it? Do you see kind of, you know, you obviously have learned the skills, you know, being a father. Does it kind of come across in the therapy room? Does it kind of across...
What, being a parent coming into the therapy room?
Yeah, being like, okay, this is how I would handle it with my child.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have to watch out for it, or how does it work?
Yeah, I'd have to watch out for that because, again, that's my life, and that's not what people are paying me for. Yeah. They're not paying me for my advice. Sometimes they're wanting it. And actually, there are times as an adolescent therapist, you would give some kind of advice about what might be more beneficial. Yeah. I certainly can identify with parents that anxiety about wanting my child to be okay. It's heartbreaking. If you think about when your child is sick and they have a fever, it's so heartbreaking to see a child, something you love more than anything in the world, in pain and suffering. You'd do anything. Yeah. And that need to protect can cloud your judgment. Yeah. And so you have to build a kind of tolerance for the discomfort being a parent brings, the uncertainty it brings. So I know when my child has a fever and I'm watching him like a hawk and I'm attending to him because I don't want him to suffer. I also know that he has to go, well, this is the way that this disease is going, this virus. I can give him what I can give him, but there's nothing more other than being here. Yeah. That's all I need to do right now. Being here, being watchful. But I can't make this fever go quicker. It's just beyond my control. Yeah. So that's like a very specific case. A lot of adults identify with that. So you can sort of give this story about, you know what it's like to see a young person that you love suffer, but there's a point you have to accept.
That is their story.
Yeah, something is going to be okay. But Brené Brown talks about foreboding joy. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but
No, tell me more.
she talks about the foreboding joy a parents experience when they creep around the corner at night and their child is asleep in the crib and they're overwhelmed with love and joy. And they realize this precious little thing I love so much. And the very next feeling they have is, oh my God, what if they die?
Okay.
And that robs them of joy in that moment because they immediately think about losing that joy and they go to all the what ifs and now they're in anxiety.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to be a parent because when you love something so much, the price of losing it is so great. So I identify with that in parents. And when they see their young person retreating to their room, or perhaps not eating, or perhaps taking risks, they have that foreboding joy. They love something so much that they can't bear to lose it, and they'll do anything to keep it safe. But sometimes they're not in danger in quite the way you think. Meaning just because they're not studying 6 hours a night doesn't mean
All right, I see.
So
I see.
Or just because they had a heartbreak doesn't mean that they're going to kill themselves.
Yeah.
But you can't take that heartache away.
Yeah.
And why should you? We have to experience these things.
That's in some way, not obviously not in the same way, but in some way it's similar with adult clients. When they have a difficulty, you can't just... And it would be almost like a typical therapist urge, like, oh, let me take it away from you. Let me get rid of all these...
Absolutely.
Anxieties, and let me calm you and reassure you that it's not going to be bad. But that's kind of almost like stepping into the parent role, but not being a therapist. I often kind of have to be mindful of my urge to rescue somebody to kind of stay maybe with the anxiety longer, which is that's where the learning comes with that for them, right? Instead of me saying like, oh no, don't worry, that's not going to happen, you're going to be fine.
There's basically you do feel that parental thing even to adult clients that want to fix or rescue. And that, like, I know that feeling, that ties into my feeling of being hopeless or useless. It's the same thing. And so it just as you have to sit with a child through a fever, sometimes you just have to sit with a client going through something. It's the sitting there that makes the difference, not the fixing.
And also, at least for me, the sitting between the sessions, leaving it there, like, most clients would have 15 minutes a week, one session, right? And so if it takes longer, then obviously you're not going to sort out everything in one session, and there are things that go beyond weeks and beyond months if it's prolonged grief or something longer. And that's partially maybe stays in some way with me being like, once a while, not very often, but once in a while, I do wonder between sessions, how is this client? Are they okay? Because I need to also watch out for my anxiety that this is not resolved yet. But I can't resolve it. I can't resolve it for them, and I can't be putting time limit on their issues, on their anxieties, on their grief, whatever it is, because it's not my task to solve.
So how do you regulate that? Maybe that moment of anxiety you get about a client.
I guess I have to trust them. I think kind of for me is the trust of me really believing, whether it's true or not, that I do trust that the client will sort it out, or not sort it out, they will kind of heal, or they will overcome whatever obstacle it is in their own time, in their own pace, rather than me kind of taking some sort of a controlling role in the dynamic. I'm there to help them, and I do my best to help them, but at the end it's not really my choice. And often I'm sure you would have the same thing. Often you think you are doing the right thing, but client is maybe just not hearing you because they are in the middle of something else. It can kind of take a while for them to get where they can actually start building or healing or recovering.
Because you have to manage that little anxiety about or that trust in them, but also like sometimes letting go of the outcome that they will make any change.
Yeah.
That can be a hard piece to
And
do.
that's also because I trust them, not in a way of like, one day you'll get that, but there is a story there. I only get glimpses of your story. Let's say if you were my client for a moment, right? And whatever happens with you, I just, something in you is looking after it, whether it is that you have to quit your police officer's job to get somewhere else.
Yeah.
I just trust that something will come out of it.
Yes. And I think you need to do that, or else you drive yourself
You go mad.
to distract. Yeah, you would be you'd suffer more than you need to.
If I was thinking like this about every single client I ever had between sessions, I would go mad.
Yeah, I don't really think about my clients between. Yeah. Sometimes they do. Some particular ones might stick with you a bit more.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's an invitation for me to think about why that might be with that particular client.
Good point.
It's often something that I'm over-identifying with, like part of their experience speaks to part of my experience, and therefore it feels a bit more connected or personal. But that's particularly a place you need to be aware when that is happening, because generally you have to go the opposite way, because their experience is never going to be yours, and what worked for me won't work for them necessarily. So that can be hard. We need to get comfort with, and so this is primarily part of my modality, I suppose. I'm an integrative therapist, so I don't have one fixed approach.
Same.
I have a foundation which is humanistic, that is creating the core conditions basically.
Yeah.
But then what a client needs may come from different parts of psychotherapy. But another foundational part is this emotional processing. What I've noticed is a lot of the symptoms that people experience that bring them to counselling, things like anxiety or sadness or, stress, not sleeping, these are symptoms of people that are not able to process emotion. So we've got a lot of intolerance to things that are uncomfortable. Okay, and this makes sense. Like if you have a headache that's not comfortable, it's painful, and you can take paracetamol for that. And why should we judge you for that? You're removing your pain. That's great, okay? But if you had a headache every day for a year, and you're taking paracetamol 4 times a day, might it be a problem? Might you need to go and actually attend to that?
See a GP and
So that's emotional processing in a nutshell. Like all emotions are physical first before they're thought. They're not thoughts. Everything emotional is experienced in the body, and our minds then try and make sense of that. But if it feels uncomfortable, it's very tempting to find a way to numb the pain or distract from it or ignore it or suppress it or deny it. And so when people are coming to therapy with their lives, they're struggling in their lives, really, they've come to the end of their avoidance of the emotion.
Times, yeah.
So a lot of the work, if they choose to do, obviously this might not unfold the way I might want, and I have to let go of that. Some people don't want to do emotional processing work, and I have to respect that.
How do you bring it into the room when you have a client, let's say adolescent or adult, and you are noticing that their symptoms are actually due to maybe long-term dysregulation or not having the skills to regulate? How do you start that conversation?
Well, I don't really tell them that that's what we're doing. I just invite them to, I suppose at first it's about building rapport. I wouldn't do this necessarily until I feel there's some kind of connection that they feel trust. So sometimes you have to listen to, or you allow the space for them to tell their story. And they might tell their story in half an hour. They might tell it over several hours, over several weeks. And there's great value in that. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's very validating, and especially for young people to be able to say what they want.
Especially the first time in therapy. Experiencing what it's like to be telling my story and being heard, not being interrupted. Maybe for the first time ever for some people. And being like, this person is just there.
Especially if it's an adult. Wow, I'm saying these things to an adult, and normally they come in with, you shouldn't, this and that. And I'm like, wow, tell me more about that.
Oh, that's non-judgmental. Curiosity. Yeah.
So you let the story needs to come out. People have a story and they want to tell it, or they don't. Sometimes they don't, and you have to respond to that. But there comes a point where I think I noticed this. An emotion starts to be experienced, and you see it in the person. You see a shift in them, or you feel it yourself. Like, I'm having a bit of an emotional reaction. I'm going to label it as kind of like a kind of modelling behaviour, and being congruent as well.
So you identify it and name it.
Yeah. So it might be kind of feeding back to a person on what they're describing and saying, I notice I feel something physically. What do you feel physically? And what do you mean? Is there any part of your body that in this moment is kind of loud, or you notice? And that's the very beginning of it, really. Yeah. I don't sit down and say, right, we're going to do emotional processing now. It's all very conversational, but it becomes tactile. It becomes inviting the person to place a hand where they feel it. And sometimes it's quite hard for people to do that.
Maybe it's for the first time. Like,
yeah.
I think especially what I do sometimes, it's hard for people to actually realize that the feelings are not in their thoughts.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you feel? Oh, I felt he shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, that's your belief.
That's right.
Can we come back to how it feels, what sensations, and especially with the body, because that's kind of where it is, where we experience it. And that could be quite a different journey for them to be like, okay, so I'm not actually saying my thoughts. I need to kind of focus on the stuff I haven't focused and haven't looked for that thing that actually is making me suffer.
Absolutely.
In some way.
They're suffering because they have been turning away from a physical sensation that's uncomfortable because they don't really know what's on the other side of it. And I think how this develops fundamentally is emotions are inconvenient. They don't choose when they appear. They just appear as we experience. So it's not very convenient to feel like crying when you're at work.
I get you now,
yeah. So, if I'm going to survive and keep my job, I can't cry.
Yeah.
So people get so good at pushing these emotions away, and it's been so long that since they've been properly in touch with their emotion, they've forgotten what it feels like. What they know is, I know it's not going to feel comfortable. I believe it's not going to feel comfortable. And if I allow this forward, what's going to become of me? Yeah. So sometimes I've noticed people have this belief, if they allow themselves to feel sadness, that it's going to lead to depression.
Yeah.
So they're very much, I'm coming to see you because I feel sad sometimes, but I can't have that. I don't want to be depressed.
I'm going to get rid of my sadness. I'm going to get rid of me crying at work.
Yes.
I'm going to get rid of me being depressed, kind of in a way.
Want to get rid of any feeling.
Yeah. That I don't know what to do with the feelings. The first thing comes to my mind is, let's get rid of it. Because obviously that's the issue.
Yes.
It's not what's behind, what's causing the emotion to come up, but that's the issue.
Yeah, so that's where we start. And that's where I start. I start with getting people more accustomed or comfortable with their discomfort, with getting confident that they can regulate their emotions. So if they get in touch with an emotion, that it's not going to disable them or it's not going to paralyze them. Because once an emotion's kind of heard, it changes really quickly in a few seconds. Yeah. But they've spent a long time turning away from their emotions.
Pushing that.
So this feels really counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So it's about building up the courage to even do that. So it's can be quite slow, or it can be quite rapid. Some people, once they start, they're like, yeah, okay.
That works.
Yeah.
I haven't tried that one, but that works. So I'll try more of that.
So to help people, I use analogy quite a lot. So I get people familiar with physical sensations that are not as ambiguous, like hunger. Yeah, so describe what hunger feels like for you. And people say various things along the themes of I feel kind of empty or hollow. It's a bit painful. I start to feel a bit tired. And then I start to get angry. I start snapping. So and what's hunger? What's your body telling you? Well, I need food. So, right, okay, so that feeling is trying to motivate you to get something that your body needs. And emotions are the same principle. The emotion's there to motivate you to adjust or to go towards something because it's what you need. So then when you say, well, what happens when you ignore your hunger? Oh, sometimes it goes away, but it comes back. And then eventually it becomes the only thing you can think of. Yeah. So you can't have a conversation.
It needs to be heard.
Yeah.
It's hitting your brain kind of in a way of to tell you something.
Yeah.
And if you're not hearing that, it's going to probably be louder.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So emotions do the same. Frequently ignored emotions, which are information about our experience that's either positive or not so good. If you ignore that, it's just going to get louder and worse. Yeah. And then you have to get more extreme in how you avoid it or deny it or ignore it or numb it, I suppose. Yeah. So that's the behaviors people do that sometimes become problematic, like addicted to social media or using substances or alcohol, shopping, buying things. That can be a distraction. So that the analogy is like, well, I compare it to physical feelings. Like if you step on a nail, you're not going to be able to step on your foot. Yeah. That's motivating you to not walk on your injured part so it can heal. It's emotions do the same thing, but then they're worried about what an emotion will feel like. So the next part or analogy I use quite a bit is about imagining being in the sea, and there's waves coming towards you. But if you dig your feet into the sand, determined to stay exactly where you are when a wave's approaching, what happens is the wave just smashes over you anyway. And, you might get knocked down or you're going to get wet for sure. But if you see a wave approaching and you relax and you allow that wave to lift you up, it will put you down gently the other side. It always does.
Interesting. Wow.
So emotions are like that. So when you're resisting emotion, you're steadfast, I don't want to be knocked over, you get overwhelmed. But when you're like, yeah, I'm feeling sadness here, I'm going to let it happen. Yep, I'm dropped down on the other side, I'm okay. But the fight to avoid crying, it means that you're going to end up losing it. Or that's what people tend to report happening. Yeah. They've been holding it back so long that just one day something happens and they can't control it and they cry for days. Yeah. That's
beautiful. Yeah. How do you, if I ask you, how do you work, with, you said gay men, straight men?
Yeah. Well, fundamentally, they're just men. Yeah.
True.
True. So you don't have to make too much of a distinction, but there can be a distinction in the sense that gay men will have experiences in the world which won't be typical for most straight men, because society generally reflects the majority, and the majority of people are heterosexual or in heteronormative situations. So gay men grow up with that, and so it's an added layer to being a man, I suppose. Being a gay man can create quite a bit of internal conflict for gay men. So sometimes therapy is quite necessary it's necessary for many people, but with gay men, it's often about validating who they are, how they feel, what kind of man they are, what they believe men to be. That can be a part of it. Or feeling safe.
Or feeling seen.
Yeah, feeling seen and validated.
Yeah.
That they're worthy. I suppose I've worked with some gay men who've had therapy before, and the difference with working with me, what is frequently said is, I felt more understood by you. Not that they had a bad experience with their other therapists, they always felt very cared for and attended to, but that aspects of what they described or their experience didn't really click with their therapist before in a way that they felt it did with me. And they were concluding that based on the way I would feedback their experience to them. Of course, my experience as a gay man is going to be mine and not anyone else's, but I think I can understand the common themes that we might face that people don't think about, like having to come out. I think coming out is a big thing because it's not something you do once.
Yeah. Sometimes
you have to do it several times in a day.
Or you do it throughout your life.
I know, and it can actually get quite draining. Yeah. And especially if your first coming out didn't go very well, even coming out to your insurers as you put your partner on your car insurance can be traumatic. It can be triggering. Yeah. So having an understanding of those sort of nuances that perhaps if you've not had that experience, you might not grasp how significant those things can be. But that was just an example. Coming out, there's other ones, but that's the one that sticks in my head quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. I would say from my experience, often the part of identity, being a gay man or a gay woman, but also the part of sexuality. How do I live as a sexual being, which is also obviously for everybody, but somehow it needs to be almost like heightened in my practice for gay people. Right? It's almost like there is almost a level of shame added on top of it, which also straight people would also have, but they maybe wouldn't be so, they wouldn't have that focus on it because of the label. And also part of maybe having open relationships and navigating open relationships, can be difficult, and then maybe kind of existing within the family. Because I think we all kind of exist in some level within families, whether we talk to them or we don't talk to them, or we are in touch, or if they are deceased, but we are part of a family in some way. Sometimes we don't know who they were, but we are part of it, and being a minority of some kind, let's say gay men, gay women, and existing within them, going to Christmas dinners, attending, there's a new phase again. You have to come out, you have to introduce yourself, going to christenings, going to weddings, going to funerals. I think it's an interesting thing how this part of their life, it's almost like creating another layer that they are dealing with almost all the time. And
then in addition to that is the kind of the dynamics of relationship. So that's a pretty key one as well. So I think some gay clients that I've worked with end up kind of overcompensating in many areas of their lives. I don't know how you feel about that, but then
in what way now? Which way you mean now?
Well, I mean, because of all of those things that you mentioned, like fitting in, or the judgments that people will levy on you just by virtue of the fact of your sexuality. So you say this is my sexuality, and already you might assume, it might not be true on the other side, but you might assume, well, this person's assuming I do these sexual activities.
Yes.
Okay, or that they're judging me in some way, or wondering where my parents went wrong, or all of those things that may or may not be happening, but they live inside the person. Okay, so to mitigate that, I'm going to be an ultra high achiever.
I see what you mean.
I'm going to present the most perfect version of me. I'm going to only let people see my pristine car, or whatever it is.
Because I have this level of shame, almost, this level of you looking at me down from your point of view. I need to compensate the other way around, and almost like to prove to you that I'm good enough as the other person, or something like that.
That's right, but that might not necessarily be living in other people's minds, but it's living in yours or mine, and it does have an impact. But that level of, and that's because there's a level of not being okay with ourselves sometimes that needs to be looked at and healed, maybe, or understood.
Homophobia, they might be creating all these needs for compensation. Managing it somewhere else.
That's right. So I think gay men have gay people. I'm saying gay men a lot. Because
I know what you mean. Maybe most of your clients are gay men.
I haven't worked with too many gay women. I have, but I think I noticed there's a difference in the kind of things that come forward as well. And I don't want to generalize, because not everyone's going to have those sort of experiences. I don't know if this is going to change. I think this might change going forward, the way that the world now is. When I grew up, there weren't positive gay role models on TV. They were either a joke or a laughing stock, or somehow nefarious in some way, or and they weren't, to be gay was to be considered unmasculine. What even is that anyway? That's another big topic for something else. But I think it drove part of the reason I joined the police force was to feel masculine and worthy as a man. Was I overcompensating for something by joining what I perceived to be an ultra macho profession that required strength? And it really did. Yeah, it required strength and a lot of characteristics that might be considered masculine. The stiff upper lip and stoic and invincible almost, hero-like.
But also, literally what you're saying is a straight man can do the same thing.
Absolutely,
to portray himself more masculine, regardless of his sexuality or
That's
anything.
right, yeah.
You know, it would apply to broader number of people.
The subject of masculine and feminine, it plays into everybody. Nobody is untouched by the gender thing. Yeah, and that's probably a bigger subject than I want to get into. But, you know, there's this thing about, being okay with who you are, which fundamentally everyone has to kind of... It's fundamentally the same, whether you're gay or straight or whatever.
Yeah.
The human struggle is pretty much about learning to be okay with who you are, and following your values and sorting those values from the ones that don't belong to you as well, the ones that we've been given that shouldn't be with us, and that's everyone has to go through that, I think. But with my gay clients, being a gay therapist has been useful for them to meet with a gay man who doesn't just gets certain experiences because of an understanding of what it's like. Yeah. So like the sort of feedback would be some therapists might not understand the dynamics in a relationship between two men or two women. They look at it with heteronormative eyes and need to almost figure out whose roles are, and it comes across in the questioning. So it's not that they're being overtly homophobic or anything like that, but the client's report I get the feeling they were trying to understand by the questioning, who does what, who does this, not necessarily sexually, but in the household, and it feels very much that they're trying to pigeonhole me into a heterosexual relationship dynamic.
Who's the man, who's the woman, yeah?
Kind of, basically.
I just have to name it because that's...
blunt as that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's necessarily true, you know. But if you start internalizing that you should have a particular role in a relationship, do you imagine how damaging that could be if it's not aligning with what you want? Yeah. But that goes for anyone.
That goes for all. Also,
it's not just sexuality.
Yeah. And I'm also I wish that this thing of some therapists trying to kind of figure out the roles. I wish it was a thing of my past.
Yeah.
Right. But also from my clients, you know, I know it's not.
It's not. It's still around.
You know, and I think it's really good to have a LGBTQI plus aware therapist.
Yeah.
In any way that knows or has some experience at least that can kind of provide the service for people who are looking for it.
Yeah, and I don't think this. I think this is something that can also be learned to a degree. It's just that who has the time to really sit down and study the dynamics of same-sex relationships? You know, beyond a few hours in their course, which is what we currently get. And I suppose it's just if you want to attend to that, then you go and you'll do that learning. Just as I don't know enough about addiction to work with addiction, but I have to own that. Yeah. So I suppose it's like therapists owning their shortcomings, I suppose, and you can still be an effective therapist owning that with your client.
But knowing where you can reach, knowing where your boundaries are, as you were saying with the addiction. Like knowing I also wouldn't work with addiction. That's something, you know, I think, you know, special course and addiction therapists would be really great with. I just don't have that course. I also don't have that interest much.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I attract different clients who don't have the addiction. Yeah, and it works for them. I want to say, you know, just really knowing kind of what you focus on.
That's right.
Yeah, and also when I come to the you know, obviously bisexual clients, transgender clients, asexual, aromantic, you know, there will be a huge kind of variety of people who are really kind of in a real minority percentage, but they need to get access to care.
Yeah.
And it needs to be provided somehow. And it shouldn't be that every single therapist should be able to do every single thing.
No, they don't need to.
Yeah.
And, I think there's nothing to stop any therapist working with any particular client other than the therapist's inability to notice when they are missing the mark somewhere. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that you're not good.
Yeah.
I think when you notice that you're missing the mark, and I know I've had to do that myself, I'm like, yeah, this person's experience, I'm really struggling to understand that. And I don't think the answer is me asking more questions about it, because now they're trying to teach me something, which isn't their job to teach me. And, figuring out, is it something in me that's blocking my ability to see it, or is it just fundamentally something I just don't grasp? And sometimes you have to have that kind of conversation with someone. That can be okay as well. I think in the interest of being congruent without being disclosive, like you can be present and vulnerable with your client and fallible, which is hard to do. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily erode their confidence in you. In fact, I think it builds it.
I think the part of asking questions sometimes, unless it's like a really kind of tell me everything, because I have no idea whatsoever what you're talking about.
Sure.
I think it can be really kind of the rapport building part. Because also let's say, gay client, right? Not everybody experience stuff the same way. Even coming out might be quite easy for somebody, quite difficult. And I would always kind of ask, what does this mean for you? What does it feel like it's for you? I know you telling me, you came out to somebody at work. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Tell me where you are with this.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to assume that I know everything about everybody is coming out.
Of course.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely reasonable to ask that. Yeah. But I suppose what is unreasonable to ask or to keep asking, I suppose I think it's unreasonable to ask a client to educate you.
I get that.
Yeah.
I think if there's maybe like a specific diagnosis, whether mental or physical, and if I have never heard of it, I probably would stop myself 3-4 questions in and then say, look, I need to maybe look it up, and if that's your core issue, I might need to see if I'm suitable working with you, because I do have my limits, and they probably would come up in the initial session or something. Yeah. And I would hope that people would know from the profiles online what everybody of us, everyone of us working with, what we specialize with, but it's not the case all the time.
No.
So you want to kind of really just double check that.
Because
both aligned.
Not everybody reads your profile.
Yes,
sometimes they just find your number.
Yeah.
So you might have to have a bit of conversation about that. Yeah.
James, it was lovely having you here.
It's been great to talk to you, Pavel.
Before you go, where can people find you?
So they can find me listed on the IACP website under Accredited Counsellors. That's IACP. You can find me on my website, which is www.jameslyster.net, N-E-T. That's my website. I'm also listed on Psychology Today, Google Businesses. If you just Google my name, you'll find me. I'm in New Ross. That's where I'm based.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pavel.
Yay! Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.